guys. Happy Thursday. I'm Dejan Kovacevic of DK Pittsburgh Sports. This is Double Shot of Steelers, a show that we do every weekday at 4 p.m. Eastern. You can see it on our YouTube channel, the DK Pittsburgh Sports YouTube channel. You can also see it on our own app and site, DK Pittsburgh Sports. All that's free. I'm not trying to sell you anything. Just a lot of different ways that you can find what it is that we do, whether it's from a spoken word or a written word perspective. Aaron Rodgers was on a political show earlier today, and very, very little of it had to do with the Steelers or his career or really his future in any context. The one portion that would be of interest to the Steelers was when he was relating things that he has that are happening off the field that have his attention. And the quote that, laid out the most was, "I've figured it out the last year when I've been in the weeds with these people who are close to me that have cancer," end quote. Now, there's nothing else to be had here. There's no, who is that? What is that? Is it family? Is it friends or whatever? That's his life, his call, his situation. But what you're talking about here, because he was the one that connected the two, is that there's a personal thing that is holding his attention, that's holding his focus, and totally independent of what any of us thinks of that. It's not football. It's not football. What does that mean for the Steelers? I don't know. Art Rooney was asked this week at the NFL spring meeting how much longer the Steelers are intending to wait on Rodgers for an answer. And I'm going to read you the entirety of his quote as well. "A little while longer, I'll say the same thing." What he means by saying the same thing is he repeated almost word for word what he said back at the NFL's annual meeting in Palm Beach, Florida. That was a couple months ago. A little while longer. So if you really, really, really want to parse the individual comments that Rodgers has made, that Rooney has made, that Mike Tomlin has made, it could not be clearer. I'm going to say this for the millionth time, but it's just becoming so obvious that it's not even really a stance on my part, that the individual who is the most invested right now in Rodgers coming to Pittsburgh is Tomlin. That's not me saying it. It's not you saying it. It's Rodgers, Rooney, and Tomlin saying it. If you just look at what it is that they're trying to talk about. Believe it or not, I'm not going to sit here and turn this into another one of those. Okay. What I'm more interested in with today's program than anything else is, what do the Steelers think about their own quarterback situation as it currently exists? What do they really think? And yes, of course, I'm including Tomlin in this. Does he actually, as he said just a couple of weeks ago, believe in Mason Rudolph? Or is it one of those ride the hot hand kind of things, or he just puts up with them, or he's worried about looking like he was wrong for 6 years, or who knows what? That's what we're going to get into today. How do the Steelers feel about the quarterback, plural, that they already have right over there on the south side? We'll be getting into that with your questions and, of course, with Chris Halleck when we come back.
DK Pittsburgh Sports, we take pride in coverage that connects our city's fans to their favorite teams. Now, that connection's stronger than ever. Introducing our all-new state-of-the-art app. Find expert inside reporting and original podcasts. Check live box scores. Track the latest stats. Chat it up with our community of thousands of fans, all in one place. The new app from DK Pittsburgh Sports. Coverage that connects.
Yeah, again, the one thing that I don't want to do here is to go getting into the gutter here. Thomas says, not you, Thomas, but just the subject. Do you think they're playing with our emotions on the cancer talk? Well, first of all, it's not a they, it was a he. This was right from Aaron Rodgers' mouth. This wasn't some kind of secondhand rumor type stuff. Okay, this is right from the man's mouth. If you believe him, then you believe this. Okay, so there's no they, there's no conspiracy to it here. There are things in life that are bigger than the Steelers, bigger than football, and bigger than just, narratives and so forth.
Right.
But Chris, that you have spoken with some conviction, and I know for a fact that it's independent of the reporting that I've done about how the Steelers feel about Mason. And I'm positive that not on the air or off the air, I've ever asked you what that is. Now, not getting into sources and stuff, okay?
Right.
We do that stuff off the camera, okay? But what is your feel for how they collectively feel about Rudolph? Again, we're not doing this one. This isn't one of those to pump him up or whatever. I want to get a perspective here as to why, as you wrote today on DK Pittsburgh Sports, why is it that they feel or seemingly feel as comfortable as they do saying, yeah, we'll wait. If he says yes, he says yes. If he doesn't, he doesn't. We're fine. That is that the feel?
Yes. It was when they signed Rudolph, that gave them the ability, like I've described it as their safety net. That gave them the freedom to go into this situation. If Rodgers was up front with them and saying, hey, I'm interested, I really feel that when it all boils down to if I play, that I'm going to sign with you guys. But I've got some significant personal things that I have to deal with, and I don't know when I'm going to be able to actually commit. And so what they do is they go to Mason and they say, hey, Mason, are you interested in a reunion? Because they have confidence in Mason Rudolph to start football games for them. I don't think that is an outlandish statement. Some other people might disagree in terms of can Mason actually do it, but as far as they're concerned, they are confident if Mason Rudolph has to start football games for them. That being said, I think they want to have a higher ceiling for 2025, which is why they continue to wait for Aaron Rodgers. They feel that Mason gives them a high floor, but they want a higher ceiling as well, if possible, if Rodgers can or ultimately does sign. So they have faith in Mason. And I know this from, and when we turn the camera off, I'll absolutely tell you who told me. It's from a very, very reliable, significant source that they have full faith in if Mason Rudolph were to actually start football games. But I think the reason why you don't just say, okay, well, let's just roll it with Mason is they do want a higher ceiling. And they believe that if Aaron Rodgers signs, it does raise the ceiling for them. It does give them a better chance.
And they should want a higher ceiling in general. I'm with Frank. Frank's side here where he says Aaron Rodgers does not give us a higher ceiling. We can debate that one all day, back and forth. Chris has one feeling on this. I have another. We've been over it a million times.
Yeah. Right now we're talking about how the Steelers feel.
Yeah.
We're outside of our opinions.
From the Steelers' own perspective, how they are, they have every right. No, they have every responsibility.
Yeah.
To push for a higher ceiling, whether it's for 2025 or beyond.
Yep.
And that's one of the reasons that the main point that I've been making, and this has included Mason, is to say, listen, you have to keep bringing these young guys in. Okay. Everyone says, oh, you're Mason Rudolph guy, whatever else here. But who was pushing harder than anybody else for Will Howard.
Yeah.
Right here.
Yeah.
Okay. There's a reason for that. Howard gives the Steelers more of a chance to find that ceiling. Who was in favor of the George Pickens trade because of the draft capital that came back, and it can be utilized in 2026 right here? Because you know what they can use that draft capital for in 2026? More potential, more ceiling at quarterback. This isn't driving the Mason Rudolph train. This is looking at what's best overall.
Yeah.
Pittsburgh Steelers at the quarterback position. So for me to feel like the Steelers are legitimately, why do I keep saying the Steelers when I know I just want to say Tomlin? Okay. No, really, when it comes to Rudolph, this is what we're talking about. Okay. And everybody knows that. For whatever reason, Rudolph still needs to, I believe this, still needs to sell this head coach that he is not the label that had been put upon him here in Pittsburgh. Okay. By mostly him. He's the one that needs to do that. But how was he going to do that? As Carroll points out, if he wasn't on the field. And then he got on the field and then made things happen. And I keep thinking this too, if the head coach just got behind him, and by the way, if Aaron Rodgers had gone on the political show today and said, you know what, I'm done, Mr. Political Guy. I've had it with football. I'm through. I'm over. I don't believe that the Steelers would have necessarily changed. That they wouldn't have followed up with something and said, well, that's it, everybody. Mason Rudolph's our number one quarterback. Like, no, you know, I don't think that would have happened. I think they would have still said, listen, the room has 4 and all those answers they've been given, and we have to get one more in here.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's exactly right. And I do know for a fact that regardless of what happens with Aaron Rodgers, or especially if he chooses to not sign, they still are going to add a fourth quarterback. And it will be of the veteran type. That could be a trade for Kirk Cousins. That could be signing Carson Wentz. That could be whatever. I mean, just any veteran quarterback that they could possibly acquire. And obviously the caliber of that quarterback will then kind of help decide the depth chart. If it's Kirk Cousins, I doubt that they would trade for him and have him be like, yep, you're going to be our number 2. I'm pretty sure that would be a situation where if they're going to go the capital that would be necessary to take on Kirk Cousins and his contract, that they're going to make him start. If it's Carson Wentz, I think you have an actual quarterback competition on your hands between Mason Rudolph and Carson Wentz. Cause I think Wentz is, borderline MVP level that he had the year the Eagles won the Super Bowl in 2017 before he got injured. I think that Carson Wentz is long gone. So you're not going to get that guy. So bottom line, they do have faith in Mason. They do. They would not be going through this entire process if they just thought that, oh crap, if we're stuck with Mason, we're screwed in 2025. Like, no, they are. That's why it seems like they're doing nothing, or they're just like, oh, we're just going to be hamstrung by Aaron Rodgers. No, because if Rodgers doesn't sign, they're comfortable with what they have at quarterback, especially after drafting Will Howard and having some upside, some youth and upside there too now.
Yeah, that's the part that John Davis brings up here, and it's a good one. He says Mason hasn't had a whole camp like ever as quarterback one. And yet he could do good going into the season, getting all the first team reps. But there's also way more than that. Yeah. There's also the dialogue that goes on with your coordinator. Okay. Remember that every single time Mason has stepped onto an NFL field, every single time, including last season in Nashville, he has been operating somebody else's offense. Okay. Every single time. Yeah. Now he'll tell you that in the final few games of 2023, when the Steelers didn't even have a coordinator. Yeah. Okay. You want to talk about coming in raw. It was Eddie Faulkner and Mike Sullivan just kind of winging it and do this and do that. And they were all communicating like in a big hurry over the course of the week. How do we get this stuff? What do you like? What do you not like? Well, Mason would say, all right, I like this. I like that. All right, well, let's just go with this. Yep. And then they fly all the way out to the other side of the country and beat the Seahawks.
Yeah.
Okay. With a lot of passing involved.
Yeah.
If you have the whole year, football is the most, people really have brutalized this term, but I'm going to use it anyway because it's correct. Football's the most scripted sport that there is. I don't mean that in the conspiracy way. Okay. I mean that in the sense that somebody's drawing out what the plays are supposed to be.
100%.
You're supposed to execute them.
Yeah. I mean, literally, if you were to look at the vast majority of, if not all of the offensive coordinator or whoever the play caller is, and you look at their play sheet, one way or another has the scripted calls for the beginning of the football game. Like they study all week of ways to attack the opponent. They put together that game plan, and then that play call sheet has the scripted calls for that first series. It is literally your opening script. And then there are on some offense, just knowing, what some call sheets look like, there are some that have even sections for emergency backups. Like for if your backup quarterback were to go in the game, here are 7 or 8 plays that this quarterback absolutely is comfortable with and likes to go to. That way, if it's 3rd and 8, we need a play. Okay, I can go call this play because I know that they're comfortable with this play. And so that's why it's actually kind of fascinating to look at the breakdown of a call sheet, because it's broken down into so many different ways so that they can be ready for any and all situations, including if an injury happens and you have to go to a backup quarterback. So, and it's even more so, even kind of more fly by the seat of your pants whenever you have your coordinator fired and the running backs coach and the quarterbacks coach are then kind of tag teaming the job. It's just interesting.
Ike says he's so over the Rodgers discussions. He's not here. Plenty of other topics. Guess what, Ike? We're talking about another topic. He's not Mason Rudolph.
We're talking about the quarterbacks that are here.
Yeah, we made that pretty explicit there at the beginning of the show. That's where we are, and that's where we're staying. Phil says, by the way, I mean, so what? If we talked about Rodgers today, big deal. I mean, that's not like, whatever. One of the things that we hear a lot from is, well, I've been watching shows all day and they were all talking about this. You should talk about something else. No, we can talk about whatever it is that we want to here. They go tell them to talk about something else if you're watching stuff all day. Most Steelers fans and front office trust Rudolph, says Phil. It's the ones that don't that worry me. Okay, again, these are semantics. We're talking about Tomlin here. Let's point this out to be totally fair here, okay? When the Steelers lost Justin Fields, and that is the way to word that, whether they felt he was outpricing himself or whatever, they still wanted him. They did. And then he was not there. Mm-hmm. It's not a coincidence that the very, very next day, a phone rings. Okay. And they go and they get Mason, they get that done within 24 hours. Mm-hmm. Now, there's no chance in the world that Omar does that independently. Okay. No. There's no chance at all that there isn't a meeting with Omar, Andy Weidel, Tomlin, Art Rooney, probably others. They probably had to get other people in, maybe even their analytics people, to say, let's see how did he actually handle doing things in Nashville, and stuff like that. Make sure you get as much information as possible. Get that done. Get it done quickly. But everyone is on board when that happens. Chris, I can't make that point strongly enough. The head coach is on board when that happens.
Yeah, they don't sign a player if Mike Tomlin is vehemently against it. Usually, whenever you talk about the triune decision, or the holy trinity of Pittsburgh Steelers football, Art Rooney II, Mike Tomlin, and Omar Khan, if one of them is vehemently against something typically doesn't happen. They're usually in unison together. Now, obviously, If two are very, very strong in support of something and one guy says no, and the one guy is Art Rooney II, it doesn't happen no matter what. The buck stops with the owner. But yeah, they don't sign Mason Rudolph if Mike Tomlin's saying don't bring him back. He's 1,000% also comfortable and confident in Mason Rudolph. But just again, their stance, obviously, otherwise they wouldn't be continuing to answer questions about Aaron Rodgers when they typically don't talk about anybody who's not under contract, by the way. If they're comfortable signing Mason, they're comfortable with him being here, and then so they can wait for Rodgers. It's just, yeah. just finding a way to put it like it's the three people at the very, very top that make all the decisions for everybody else.
Although Andy's in the room for all of them. Andy is. I don't want to ever underplay. Andy was 100%. A finalist for the job that Omar got. Andy, that's not why he has the position, but it tells you how highly they regarded Andy in coming over here from Philadelphia. He has real responsibilities within the organization, principally, obviously, the draft.
Yeah. I mean,
that's a big thing for him.
He puts together the draft board, like their big board. Like
that is not nothing.
Yeah, no. So he definitely has responsibilities and considerable responsibilities. But yeah, ultimately, when it comes to final decisions, it's between Rooney, Tomlin, and Omar.
They took it hard, though. Wandering Warrior says, does anyone remember how Chuck Noll was with Terry Bradshaw in the beginning? No. I mean, that was 60 years ago or something, right?
A long time ago.
Yeah, no.
Over 50 for sure.
Yeah. One thing about the 70s Steelers subjects, though, is that they never fade. Have you ever noticed that?
Yeah.
Like even people who weren't watching that team talk about it as if it was their own. Like people who are too young to see that team, they'll go, oh, yeah, and in the 70s, they did this, and Chuck Noll did that. And remember, like what? Mm-hmm. It's amazing. That just never, ever, ever goes out of style, the 70s Steelers stuff. They're going to be doing it 150 years from now. They're going to be making references to the 70s Steelers.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, everybody jumps in. Noll was hard on Bradshaw. Noll was not a people person like Tomlin. Something, Nolan Bradshaw. It's crazy. Highland Daddy says, I think Tomlin trusts Ben Roethlisberger's opinion, and Ben openly did not like Mason from the jump. Said we're getting into some narratives here, but said he might retire and got surly when we took a quarterback. Ben's irritation colored Tomlin's view of Mason. Come on.
It's conjecture.
Well, it's also, again, we're talking about stuff that's dated. That's a few years ago now, and Ben's not here.
Yeah.
Tomlin, I've tried to relay this before, but his stance, as best as people on the inside can read it, not me, people over there, as it relates to the quarterback position, is he'd really rather not be bothered by it. Okay. He has his defense and he wants to do that. And he wants his offensive guy to do kind of like what Matt Canada did. Find an office way down the hall. No, further. No. The one after the closet. Yeah, that one. Okay. Go ahead and choose that office. Okay. Stay there. Run the offense. I've got work to do. Okay. And where the quarterback position is there specifically, it was just Ben's to run. Mm-hmm. So anything else that happened, Kevin Colbert was the one who really fell for Mason. Just thought Mason made a big impression on him. Mm-hmm. Okay. And I understand that in part because I know for a fact that KC was over at the game over at Old Heinz Field when Mason and James Washington were eating Pitt alive. Okay.
Yeah.
So KC goes and gets his quarterback. He does it kind of like a Green Bay thing. You bring in the young guy. You make sure that there's always someone in the stable and everything else. And Tomlin was like, I mean, okay, do what you want. That's what this is. This is a head coach who is focused entirely on defense. are almost entirely on defense. And I don't think that's ever going to change.
I really do think that, and this is my conjecture here, but I'm trying to make sense of the decisions that are being made here. I'll try to piece this together. So they took the swing on Kenny Pickett. It didn't work. Okay. All right. You need a franchise quarterback. Everybody knows that. Everybody knows you need to get the young franchise quarterback. You draft him in the first round, or whatever round you happen to get him in, but he turns into your franchise guy. Okay. Until you can get that guy, I think, again, conjecture here, that Tomlin would just rather have the veteran quarterback who knows the game, who's played at a high level, who can do a lot of stuff pre-snap. And that way there's a little bit, number one, a higher floor for sure, but also there's just a level of trust that he can have in the offense. Hence signing Russell Wilson last year, because the only reason that makes sense to me is for that reason, because in terms of schematic fit, it made no sense whatsoever to sign Russell Wilson whenever you hired Arthur Smith to be your offensive coordinator, because that did not mesh whatsoever. It was never going to mesh, and it did not.
The personalities. Just to point that out. It's not about personalities.
No, it's about actual. Arthur Smith wants to attack the middle of the field, specifically out of play action. Russell Wilson cannot or just won't throw to the middle of the field. So it just doesn't work. He just wants to throw deep balls all the time, and we saw that play out. But again, the only reason to me that it makes sense is that, again, it raises the floor. Russell Wilson's a former Super Bowl winner. He's won multiple Pro Bowls. He's at one time played at a very, very, very high level in this league and will be considered at least to be in the Hall of Fame one day. Aaron Rodgers, even higher. I mean, we're talking
way
top
higher.
3, top 5 quarterbacks of all time here. 4-time MVP. Like, that's, again, now granted, better schematic fit for sure. That just happens to go hand in hand. I mean, he's at least played 4 years under Matt LaFleur, who was Arthur Smith's, influence. So there's at least a schematic fit there. But again, if I can try to piece this together, I think that until they can find that quarterback, which might be in next year's draft, he would just rather have the veteran quarterback that knows the game, that can do all the pre-snap stuff, that he can have a good level of trust. Sorry, that was really long.
But I'm saying, but that's what he's saying is you just go right ahead.
Yeah.
You do that thing, that quarterback thing. I'll be over here. That's it. Yeah. I don't think it's anything more than that. When I look at the way he has handled this position for a long, long time, that's what I see.
Yeah.
That's what I see. Reno says, it feels like Tomlin's only prerogative this year is to sustain his winning season streak. Again, this just never, ever, ever comes up.
He never talks about it.
Nobody does.
Nobody does.
I don't even hear it around here. This is stuff that comes up from you'll refer to them as national media. It's media that does not cover the team.
Mm-hmm.
That's all it is. That's what they can designate themselves, the national media, because they're all sitting in a cubicle in Bristol, Connecticut. Okay. But they're not, there's nothing national or special about them. They're not anointed in any particular way. They're just, that's their job. They sit in the cubicle and throw takes out. If you're here and you're covering the team, there's nobody who brings this up ever. Not inside the team, not outside the team. And actually, I don't even hear it that much in the public.
He does not care. Yeah.
Why would he? What is it? It's not even a thing.
He does not care. If he were to go 7-10 next season, he'd be really disappointed.
Because they would suck.
Because they'd suck, and because they didn't make the playoffs. And even if it would give him a better draft position, he'd still be pissed because they didn't make the playoffs. They did not win the Super Bowl. Believe it or not, Mike Tomlin wants to win a Super Bowl. It's not like that's not his goal. He doesn't want to just be 9-8 or 10-7 every year. He wants to win another Lombardi.
That is Tomlin's objective. Somehow that prompts Tim to say, DK, your contempt for Tomlin keeps leaking out lately. I'm not here to hide anything from anybody. Okay. I publicly called for a change at head coach after this past season. I have zero contempt for the man. Actually, I have nothing but immense respect for him. Okay, watch here. I'm saying this right now to you. No, nothing leaking, nothing being hidden or sneaky about it. Okay, he is a phenomenal human being, figurehead, leader of men. All those things that you think that he is, that you would hope that he is in real life, he actually is. All right? All of this can be true, and at the same time, the Steelers can be run in the year 2025 in a different way that befits the NFL in the year 2025. Okay? There's nothing personal here. There's nothing leaking. There's nothing. I don't mean to get all animated here or whatever, but I hear this on, I think I detected something there that he said, come on. See, Frank Ray says, I used to love Mike Tomlin, and now I can't stand anything about him. Frank, respectfully hear it. And Chris, I'd love your view on this, whatever it happens to be. If you spent 10 minutes with me or Chris on the sideline at a practice or in Latrobe, and you were within an earshot of this guy with Tomlin, you'd fall in love with him. Okay, seriously. In love.
Seriously, like all it took for me, first time on the beat, first thing I ever covered was an OTA in 2022, and it took me 10 minutes into that OTA to be like, this dude's not a cheerleader. Oh, this dude is not a glorified cheerleader. This dude
he's all that. I mean, but in a way, he can be that if you don't look at it in the negative context. Okay?
But that's what I'm talking about. I'm not. Yeah. I'm talking about that context that was painted about him, I think, by Terry Bradshaw, by the way. No. He is a phenomenal football coach. That's just the best way I can just like he's
a leader of men.
Yeah.
Okay. And one of the things we got to see up close, whether it was during COVID time and some of the extraordinary steps that had to be taken and some of the extraordinary steps that he took to connect to people around COVID time, around the period about where the whole country really became immersed in the racial injustice issue, but the NFL was in the forefront of it. Tomlin stepped right to the front. Not because he's African-American, but partially because he is, but also just because he realized that he was the head coach. He was the figurehead. He was the guy who had to do the speaking. Yeah. And he did. And he stood tall in that setting. That's a leader. Yeah. Okay. Now, is his clock management awful? We can get into all the football stuff,
we can
right?
Talk about the flaws, and every coach has flaws, man. Everyone does.
Yeah, and I'm going to repeat, my stance here is that the Steelers would be better off moving on to a new head coach, to a whole new time and a whole new period for this franchise. But hate him or something? My God, no.
Yeah. And I think we nowadays we just get caught up in narratives now, like for example, the Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay stuff, like these are brilliant minds and everything. Now Sean McVay has a Super Bowl trophy in his trophy case. Kyle Shanahan, he was the offensive coordinator of Falcons team that blew a 28-3 lead in the Super Bowl. Right? He's led a 49ers team to the Super Bowl a couple of times and they haven't won it, phenomenal football coaches. Nothing changes about that. But Mike Tomlin, I mean, has his own successes in this league. And I will never subscribe to the theory that he only won because he had cowardice players.
It didn't hurt. And
it did not hurt.
Coordinator.
It did not hurt, but I just still remember. I still remember some of the stories here from the players. And specifically some of the stuff that went into happened during Super Bowl week, actual coaching things. And you're kind of like, that's a good football coach. Like from Troy Polamalu, like his stories about that. Like we're not talking about some scrub on who was playing third string long snapper or anything like that.
There's there's a lot of different directions you can go with the conversation of the head coach. But I saw that one comment. I was like, what are you? Really? Yeah. Come on. You know, David Harrison just wishes the show would proceed to more Chewbacca sounds.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah,
We've got a ways without letting the show go off the rails. So,
yeah. Mike says you can't deny his charisma and magnetism. You can't.
no.
He eats the room alive anywhere that he walks into the room.
Yep.
Okay. In-game decision making, roster selection, lineup selection. Becoming way too stuck on certain players just because he trusts their makeup on Sundays in stadiums, okay, and things like that. Totally 100% valid criticisms. And again, for me, enough that I would rather see him replaced. But these other things, you cannot take those away from him. We're throwing this crazy thing at you called shades of gray. Okay, you don't get a lot of that anymore. When you're watching sports conversation of any kind or listening to it or reading it or anything, you don't get a whole lot of, hey, here's some nebulous stuff. Everything has to be super crazy hot take in one direction or the other. Give me a break. Mario wants to know, I always say, why didn't Cower win with Cower's team?
Well, he did.
And it's funny how this concept never applied to any other team. Like Mike Sullivan never won with Mike Johnston, 2 Stanley Cups with Mike Johnston's players.
Right.
What happened? He came along. He was just a really great coach and way better.
Yeah. And the other part that I want to, at least, try to paint about that transition was, yes, like the Steelers won the Super Bowl in 2005, but they also went 8-8 in 2006. They were not as good. They were definitely not the same football team that they were even one season prior. Now, granted, that was right after Ben's accident, and that obviously had a big impact on that team. But, it's not like Tomlin immediately took the team over and went and won. I mean, they had a good season in 2007, his first year, but he ran them into the ground during training camp. And by the time the playoffs came around, they were dog tired and couldn't play. And so he learned his lesson, did things a little differently, and they turned into a 12-4 football team that won the Super Bowl.
Michael says, you have a powerful voice, DK, and I started listening to you and Ramon Foster for about a year before the Matt Canada debacle. If you say that you don't like something, your listeners will hate them. I've been told this sort of thing before as it applies to all 3 of the teams that I cover, okay? But I'm trying to figure out a good, healthy way to put this. When you're writing, specifically in my process of writing, okay, because I've only been doing this thing, the podcasts and the videos and whatever, for about 5 years now. But when you're writing, you are writing to express no stance of anybody else's. It's just your own. You're also doing it in a way, and I was taught this part of it by an elder of mine at the Post-Gazette many years ago. You're also doing it in a way that you can't worry about what the repercussions are or how someone else will take it or use it for their own purposes. Okay, this happens a lot, by the way, as it relates to the baseball club across the river, because that's a really hot issue here, the selling of the team, the finances, and all that stuff, okay? Yeah. Oh, you said this. Hey, look at this. He said this about that. He's on our side. Nope. Yeah. Just expressing an opinion here. Mr. CJ, I like that. It says Gruden won a Super Bowl with Dungy's players. Switzer won a Super Bowl with Jimmy Johnson's players. Nobody seems to care about that. Only Tomlin gets mentioned. I know where you're heading there, CJ. I had a good one here from Kanan. Where is it here? Wasn't this one? Kanan's been killing it with some of these really good questions today. I'm going to get him on. Which is, will we even have a chance to see Will Howard play? And I'm not talking about preseason. If we go quarterback in round 1 next year, does Howard become Mason Rudolph 2.0 and just get stuck as QB3 for the scout team? I think it's a fair thing to bring up. I also think that if Mason's QB1, that you owe it to the Steelers, you owe it to your current players to make sure that you've got a QB2 who can step right onto the field. And if you want to talk about Mason 2.0, don't forget that this is what happened to Mason in 2019, was that he was QB2 and he was not ready to step onto an NFL field that soon. And it ended up affecting his career in the other direction.
Yep. I don't think. I think if the Steelers if everything works out the way that they want, Will Howard will likely not see the field in the regular season. We're talking serious injuries happening, or like Aaron Rodgers has a season-ending injury, and now Mason Rudolph becomes QB1, and then Rudolph has to miss some time for something because of a minor injury, whatever, and then Will Howard is then forced to play. But other than that, they would rather him. But that doesn't mean he's just destined to be a QB3. Matt Williamson and I on the Southside Beat have talked, and Matt's put it in a way he could become Jason Garrett, who was just right there to support Troy Aikman, like for all those years in Dallas. Like he could be that. He could be. Yeah, I think the way he's put it is Tiger Woods' caddy. You know, he could just be right there because next year, if the Steelers do get their franchise quarterback in the draft, you know, they trade up into the top 10, they take their quarterback, and that's who they're going to support. Maybe Will Howard just turns into his backup for his career. And again, if Will Howard turns into Charlie Batch, that's a successful draft pick, especially because he was a sixth-round pick.
So. Yeah. That's a pretty nice pick. I'll take Charlie all day long.
Exactly.
When you're talking about the 1, 2, and the 3 in this slot, the other thing I wanted to throw into that conversation, Chris, is that this is one of the reasons that I'm convinced that QB2 in the Mason as QB1 context would not be some sort of star. I think it'd be somebody you sign for 1 year. And that's part of the reason why. Mm-hmm. Okay, if you're going to go pull a Ryan Tannehill out of retirement, just to drop a name, I'm not advocating for it. I don't have any idea what kind of football shape or motivation he's in. He's 36 years old.
Yeah,
he would obviously know the Arthur Smith offense more than most.
Very well.
But regardless, if you do that, you don't want him blocking anybody in 2016. Chris's best friend Butthole says, could Tomlin maybe be a good coach, but ultimately be better suited as a coordinator given recurring concerns with in-game management and finer details? Other way around, dude. This is actually who you want running the motivation and going around the locker room and everything. He's perfect for it. Yeah. Whereas as a coordinator, look, you don't have to wonder what kind of defensive coordinator Tomlin is because he's it right now.
Tomlin's his fingerprints are all over the defense. Tara Lawson calls the plays. Like Tara Lawson does. Now, granted, it's not like Tara Lawson just sits there with a clipboard on Sundays and calls the plays through a headset. He does do more than that. He has input. He definitely comes, he plays a role. He's not just a puppet. But Tomlin's fingerprints are all over the defense. There's no denying that.
David Harrison drops a name from the distant past. Russ Brown, the former great sports editor at the old Pittsburgh Press. No, this was not. I never worked for the Press. I was at the Post-Gazette, and the advice I'll give you the name. It was from Bruce Guiden, the late iconic columnist here. It was over a lunch that we had in Bradenton, Florida, one summer a few years back. And he just said, you can't worry about how people will take your material and run with it. Yeah. You just have to be as clear as you possibly can and write from your own voice. And I never forgot that. Really good advice, by the way.
Joshua Dobbs, and I don't think this is the actual NFL quarterback / rocket scientist. No, I know it's not. He says Mike Tomlin needs to be better at delegation. I do think he's starting to get, over the years, getting a little bit better at that, but I also think that comes with specific hires. For example, I don't think he's as fine delegating to Matt Canada as he is to Arthur Smith. I think he has a certain level of respect for Arthur Smith that's higher, obviously much higher than Matt Canada because, well, Arthur Smith was also a head coach for 3 years. Regardless of his success, he's been a head coach for 3 years. It's the same thing with like Brian Flores. Like, do we think that Brian Flores was just there, just kind of doing high fives and stuff like that? Like, no, he played a role. That's Mike Tomlin maybe possibly taking a small little piece off of his plate and giving it to Brian and being like, hey, handle this stuff for me. I think he does do that with certain instances, but I also don't think he's going to do that with first or second year coaches either.
Mike asks here, could Tomlin be similar to Mike Sullivan, a great coach, but not the right fit for us right now? How do the two situations differ? And the Penguins are going through a thing. Okay. And it's an unusual thing. There are some similarities in that the Steelers still have Cam Hayward and TJ Watt. Of course, neither of them has won a championship. The Penguins' older core, of course, has won several championships, but they'd like to get one more, and they'd like to capitalize. When you see Cam perform the way he did in 2024, and you see what Sid just did this past season for the Penguins, there are parallels. Okay, greatness is still greatness.
Yep.
TJ has greatness in him. Okay, things got a little rough there down toward the end here, but TJ's got some of that. You do want to win while you have those great players in. Sullivan was very obviously reluctant to bring in young guys and to infuse them into the team. And, Chris, we've seen, examples throughout the Stanley Cup playoffs of teams that have done it oppositely. One of them being probably the reason you're wearing your green shirt today, the Dallas Stars prevailing last night over Edmonton with a big third period comeback.
Huge.
Down at American Airlines Arena. They 6-3. I mean, they were down 3-1 going in.
3-1 heading in the third period.
But a lot of it was the Stars bringing in Wyatt Johnstons and other young guys and incorporating them when they weren't necessarily the coach's convenient choices. I'd like to think that Tomlin has been, if I had to compare Tomlin and Sullivan in this regard, Tomlin's been better at this. Tomlin will actually, at times, he'll take a rookie and go berserk with him. He'll actually take it too far, where he'll do the anointing thing. No one can say that Najee Harris didn't get, for example, right? Okay. I'm not even getting into Kendrick Green. Okay.
Oh man.
But this raises an interesting a thought that I was having the other day about Derek Harmon. Does he dare put Derek Harmon or YA Black out there? The defensive front that's so important to him, and where he's had two older guys now for a while. And my thought process on this is, hell yeah.
Oh yeah, he will.
Yeah, he will.
I mean, going through
say it out loud too. I'm sorry, Chris.
Yes.
Just to throw this out. He'll say it out loud when they do make a play, whether it's in week 1 or week 2. You know what his response is going to be? Because he uses this one all the time. He'll say, well, that's why we picked him where we did. Next question. It won't even be like, good job, kid.
Yeah. Going through that Steelers Ravens 299 game, at certain times, because of how badly they were getting gashed, they would have a completely different rotation out there on the defensive front. We're talking, Cam Hayward, TJ Watt, Keanu Benton, Larry Ogunjobi, Alex Highsmith. At one point, all 5 of those guys were off the field. I mean, your edge rushers were Nick Herbig and Jeremiah Moon. Your defensive line were Montravius Adams, Isaiah Loudermilk, and maybe Ogunjobi was still the one out there, but it was still a completely different rotation. The rotation looks a lot different if you have Cam Hayward and Keanu Benton and Derek Harmon and YA Black and now Isaiah Loudermilk is now the 4 or the 5. It's different. You want to have that deeper rotation. You need to have that deeper rotation because you also want people like Cam Hayward and even to a certain point, TJ Watt, maybe not playing 80% of the snaps. They want them to play lesser percentage so that by the time the fourth quarter comes around, those guys are a lot more fresh and a lot more effective.
Josh Cook gets our last question in for the day. Says, if Aaron Rodgers comes here and the Steelers go 9-8, what good is that to anyone? On the flip side, if Mason would go 12-5, do you draft a quarterback next year? Those are two really extremely different hypotheticals. I'm not even sure how to connect them. Okay, you're just saying that you think a lot less of Rodgers than you think of Mason, and not really making another point here, respectfully.
Well, the other part of that is you can't make decisions based off of a hypothetical situation. You can't, you have to make a decision based off of what you think is going to happen. Yeah. You sign a certain person to a contract not because of necessarily what they've done. That obviously plays a factor, but you sign a person to a contract because of what they are going to do for you in the future, for that upcoming season or for however many years you sign into that contract. If they sign Aaron Rodgers to a 1-year contract, that means they are signing him to be a really good Pittsburgh Steeler and be the best option at quarterback for them for 1 season. Maybe they can revisit it again next year. Who knows? I doubt it, but We don't know that. It depends on what happens during the season. The Steelers were convinced in August last year that they were going to re-sign Russell Wilson. I heard that from very, very much near the top of the organization.
Yeah, I remember this.
By the time the season comes around, it ain't happening. They completely pulled the plug on that. What happens during the season absolutely changes the way you go into a season.
Well, I'll take that specifically because I ended up reporting. This was about 2.5 months ago in a Friday Insider.
Yeah, it was like February or something. I think
that the thing that changed their mindset about Russ. And again, I'm not breaking news here. I've reported this already in print.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Is that they were surprised to see that he lost his zip.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't making the throws that he needed to make. That's why he started throwing those prayer balls up. He wasn't making the throws. Like, I'm talking about physically. Okay. Like, he just wasn't executing the throws. And that was something that was not the case earlier in the season. Now, this is not my perspective. This isn't me saying this. This was them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. This was how they felt about it. Whether they're right or wrong.
Right.
So, but yeah, anyway, hey, listen, let's call this one a day. We've been at it for a while here. I'm gonna get the boss to do the
I feel like we stayed on topic for the vast majority of this show too. I think we did a good job of not getting stoned in Market Square.
Yeah, no. We really did. When we come back, we're gonna take care of some business here on the back end.
At DK Pittsburgh Sports, we take pride in coverage that connects our city's fans to their favorite teams. Now, that connection's stronger than ever. Introducing our all-new state-of-the-art app. Find expert inside reporting and original podcasts. Check live box scores. Track the latest stats. Chat it up with our community of thousands of fans, all in one place. The new app from DK Pittsburgh Sports. Coverage that connects.
It's a fun show. Getting all kinds of pushback from people about the political show. I couldn't care less. Honestly, I really don't care. If the guy's political or if he isn't political, I just could not care less. I don't watch or listen to anything else. I don't have time in the day. I thought that's what he was. That's what I said he was. Who cares? Stella says, we are the ones driving the train. And you know what? Stella's right about that. I don't even know what it means. It just sounds good. You know, Carrie came in with one gift today. Matthew Bunk's been with us for 2 full years. That's really cool. Really, really cool. Dale Penny said, I'll say this, like I tell my children, actions speak louder than the words. Even if Aaron Rodgers doesn't sign with us, I don't believe Mason Rudolph will be the starting quarterback. He actually will, Dale. He actually will. Not for, any sort of holistic reason, just because there really aren't any other options at this stage of an off season without getting crazy. And you're not going to get crazy. Other gifts came along here. Eric came in with 5. Carol dropped 10. Our butthole friend came in with, I think he ended up with 6 total. James Fairfield with a couple bucks on a super sticker. All of this is appreciated. All of this from all you guys here. We are currently at 2,460 memberships. Wow. So we're 540 away from the goal. Yeah. A lot of these, I'm going to keep repeating this, but a lot of these are gifts and those expire after a month. And then you'll see that number come back down. That's why we're referencing as often as we are this web address over here, dkps.net/join. You can come in and get your own membership. And it becomes recurring and everything else. You know what I'm saying? You know, as I'm saying, you can tell she's laughing over there. You can tell the show's been going a little bit too long. Danny says, good show, guys. I thought it was. There's nothing wrong with that. We touched on a lot of subjects, shared information that nobody else would have. In most cases, just repeated stuff that we'd reported before. But if you're tuning in for the first time, you're hearing it for the first time. Good stuff. We will be back with another one of these shows tomorrow at 4 p.m. And you say bye-bye.